Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Knights of the Pageless Library. This is a podcast where we review audiobooks, even though today we're doing something a little different. If you listened to our last episode, we reviewed The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and today we're going to take a look at the two movie adaptations of the book, one from the 1960s and one from the 2000s.
That's right. And there are still no pages involved, so we're okay.
Yeah, we didn't have to read anything.
So we were kind of going back and forth on how to talk about these, and I think we'll just try to keep it as fluid as we can. We don't want to be so rigid in this, but basically what we're going to do is we'll kind of reiterate the Time Machine book really quick, reiterate how we feel about that, then we'll talk about the 1960s film and then the 2002 film, sort of in that order.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate the book really quick, the book essentially is a story about a time traveler who builds a time machine, surprise, surprise, and goes very, very far into the future and does some really stupid stuff. And the book, we both basically hated the book and didn't think it was very interesting. And several times in the episode about the book, we mentioned, well, I know I was doing it a lot, but we mentioned the movie, the 2002 film. So
Right.
we decided that, well, we need to rewatch the movie and then watch this 1960s version as well and talk about those just to see how they go down.
Yeah. And just kind of see, I guess, like how they compare to the book, because I feel like if it was up to me, the book doesn't deserve a movie.
So yeah, and that's an interesting thing to say. And so with that, let's roll right into the 1960s film. So how do you want to do this? Do you want to give your recommendation right off the bat, or how you felt about it, or do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay, that's fair. So what did you think?
I liked the one from the 60s actually a lot.
I am so glad you said that because, it's funny. While I was watching it, I thought this is what that poor book needed to bring that story to life, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's saying a lot. So this movie, the 1960s film adaptation of The Time Machine, I felt is very, very true to the book, essentially, as true as right. So as true as the filmmakers could be, because of how not interesting the story basically is. And for 1960s film, I thought they did a pretty decent job, actually.
Oh, dude, the cinematography is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I was feeling kind of the same way. And I mean, I know I haven't seen like a ton of 1960s films, but I thought they did pretty good for what they were trying to do, and clearly not on like a gigantic budget.
No, dude, that's actually that's why I was laughing before we started, because the budget for this was like what? It's like 800,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the budget for the one that 2002 is 80 million.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know. That was just, it's crazy to me.
That is pretty insane. I mean, and so I mean, I really enjoyed the 1960s version as well, actually. I think that it was the most fair representation of the book you were going to get, especially for the time.
And I think the way that they actually like approached the story in the 1960s one was like you said, it's like a lot more. It was like by the book, like literally, because the 2003, the 2002 or 2003, I can't remember which year. 2002.
2002, yeah.
That one, which we'll talk about in a bit, I actually have a lot of issues with that one.
So, and because, I mean, I would say the key differences for me is that the 1960s one, after seeing it follows the book as well as they could, essentially, whereas the 2002 one definitely takes a lot more kind of creative liberties on the story. It uses the same basic story to an extent, but takes a lot more kind of creative liberties. So the 1960s version, though, essentially brings the book to life.
Yeah.
And actually does it very well. Like there's actually there's things that in this movie I saw and I was like, oh, okay, now that makes sense in the book.
Dude,
like,
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Really?
Like, yeah, because it did a better job of like making like a bright and vibrant world in the movie. Like I feel like they took the book without like betraying anything, and they just added to the story.
Well, sure, and I agree with you on that because, so, like we said, so if you go back and listen to our previous episode where we talk about the Time Machine book, you'll understand. I don't want to reiterate the entire story for time's sake.
Pun.
Oh, anyways, so this one basically starts with the time traveler, which he has a name in the movie, which I appreciated that they gave everybody names. They humanized everyone, which I thought the book was weird.
Got me was the fact that Philby, one of the only named characters in the book, is actually in the movie.
He's in the movie, and he has a very distinct role in the movie,
which was really cool. Hang on, well, I guess we'll get to that in a second. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
So it starts off with the time traveler, and actually they did a very good hook in the beginning of this because they start off with the time traveler. They basically start off with the dinner scene at the end of like what transpired. So which some people have a problem with this because they basically start the story at the end and then they revert back to the beginning.
Well, but he's telling the story from that point though.
Correct, and I thought they actually did a pretty good job. So we get this dinner party of, all his esteemed guests, and they're at his house waiting on him, and they keep, where is the time? Well, where is, I cannot remember his name, Alexander maybe?
Yeah.
At least that's his name in the second one, or in the 2002 one. I can't remember his name in the
hang on,
60s one. George. That's his name, George. So we get George stumbling in from outside the room as these guys are sitting down to dinner, and he's all disheveled and beat up. And they're like, "My God, man, what's wrong with you? Where have you been?" And then it kind of, well, let me tell you the story. And then we woo through like the wavy screen, blurs everything out, and then we boop back to the beginning. And this is where he had them over the first time for dinner. And he shows them his miniature version of his time machine, which I thought the mini version, I was like, wow, that's a pretty good rendition of a time machine. Like,
yeah, it's kind of cool.
I'm not going to lie, because I had not seen anything about this 1960s film before we decided to watch it and had no idea what to expect. But I thought for sure, I was like, this is going to be the jankiest looking.
I know, dude. I was like, oh, God.
I just assumed that the time machine was going to look terrible, but I saw the miniature version and I was like, oh, actually, that's not too bad. It looks all right. So he proceeds to demonstrate to them this time machine, and they push the little lever and it disappears. And they're like, well, it's just some kind of magic trick. It's not really traveling through time. Then he's like, no, I have a full-size one. I plan on traveling through time. And does he even show him the full-size one? I can't remember.
No. Philby asks him. No, he tells Philby he'll show him, and Philby's like, I don't want to see it.
Mm-hmm. That's right, because it's as they're leaving. They're all kind of leaving his house. He's like, Philby, I will show you. I'm not kidding.
Well, Philby stays behind.
That's right.
It doesn't matter.
So then the time traveler, George, goes and he gets in his full-size time machine, which, again, I was like, that's kind of a sweet-looking time machine for
the
1960s.
Practical effects that they use in this movie are actually pretty good.
Yeah, so go ahead and talk about that, because the whole next little sequence.
Oh,
is
are you talking
all...
about when the city gets blown up?
Well, I mean, from the beginning. So the way that they did I'm a huge fan of stop motion and stuff, and they took full advantage of this for that time frame.
Yeah, he goes forward through time, and he's watching this mannequin for a while, just as the fashion changes until they board up his window because it's been so long and nobody lives there. Which I like that he comes out and he talks to Philby's son, which I like that too. That there's like this kind of recurring character that he keeps running into.
So, and I'm just going to interrupt for a second because I appreciated this, that he was stopping at intervals, which
Yeah, he was.
you would do if you were traveling through time. Whereas in the book, he's like, "Oh no, I'm just going straight to the year 800,000. There's nothing else to see here." Like, it didn't even
Yeah.
make any sense.
And it was actually, I do like the way that they show like everything kind of aging around him. I like all that.
They did a good job. Like I said, for a 1960s movie, I thought they did a pretty decent job of that.
And I do really appreciate like the scene where they show like the city getting destroyed. And I mean, if you really look closely at it, it's clearly just models.
Oh,
But
yeah, but dude,
it's so cool.
good. For miniature models, I love it. I
Yeah,
loved
it's
it.
pretty cool. It's
Most
pretty
people
cool.
would probably be like, "It's freaking cheesy. These are the fakest
Man.
graphics I've ever seen."
Yeah, dude, these. Dude, what even are these graphics?
But again, I think for a 1960s film, you know, it's freaking 60 years old. I thought it held up pretty well. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
upset by
No.
what they were using at the time.
Yeah, and then so he eventually gets to like whatever freaking 8,000 year, whatever, what it's like 800,000.
So, well, I thought this was interesting too. They changed this from the book. Is during when the city is getting destroyed, they brought up a couple of very key points here. Is the sirens were going off to get everybody into underground shelters, and the second important point is
Oh,
that
dude, I didn't even think about that.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
So, and then the second important point is that it basically the bombs are dropped on the city and it causes like a lava eruption. So he gets in his time machine real quick to try to escape this, and basically he's encased in stone because of where his time machine happened to be sitting.
Oh, yeah,
So
you're right.
it makes more sense in this why he goes that far in the future, because he has to go into the future to get himself out of the stone, basically.
Right.
Which I like that. They put a lot more meaning behind why he would go that far into the future.
True. You're right. It makes a lot more sense.
So when he arrives in the future, they painted this picture incredibly well because I was having such a hard time picturing it in my own head. So he arrives in front of the Sphinx statue with the doors underneath it, and they did a great job of showing this scene here, I thought. He walks away from his time machine and he's basically in like a jungle. It's like a super lush environment. The fruit grows to like 10 times the size it does today because he thinks that man has advanced so far that we got the environment in such balance that it's just basically, you know, everything is amazingly fertilized and the world is completely fertile, essentially.
And he thinks that like there's peaceful people, right?
Yes, he just assumes that everybody is in harmony with everything because of this. So, and then he finds the Eloi people by the river. He finds all these people dressed in kind of like very like pastel colored clothing, and they're all blonde, and of course they're all white because, you know, it was in the 1960s.
Well, but I do think that's supposed to be like the book because they're supposed to be like pale skinned.
Correct. So, and I think that there's a reason for all of it in, you know, in a little bit. So he's like trying to interact with these people, and this was a little bit different from the book in which they weren't interested in him at all when he showed up. Like,
Not really, yeah.
They didn't really care that he showed up. However, if you guys can hear my kids knocking at the door, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Apparently they really want it here. However, I thought that this did an amazing job of painting this picture of these Eloi people because we kind of brought this up in the book about them being like cattle, essentially, which spoilers a little bit, but
this movie's from the 60s.
Well, yes. But they did a good job because this is basically what these people are supposed to act like, is like cows that we would see out in a field.
Yeah.
So this is pretty accurate in my opinion for like the kinds of reactions you might get from like just regular herd animals. I mean,
yeah,
I
it does
thought,
make sense.
I actually thought they did a pretty good job of like explaining that without even really saying it in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And the part when like Weena's in the water and there's dudes like right next to her and they don't do anything.
Right, which, like I said, they did a pretty good job of just kind of showing them as like animals, basically. But George just assumes that's not what they are. He's in the year 800,000, he just assumes these are incredibly advanced, humans who are.
It kind of bothered me that he could talk to them.
Oh yeah, right away, immediately. They just knew English, by the way. Just so
yeah, which the 2002 one does a little bit better with that.
So, yeah, he saves one of them as drowning. It happens to be Weena, which I think is the worst name you could ever give a character ever. Just
Why?
so everybody's, dude, because it just sounds like he's saying Wiener the whole time. That's all I hear.
Yeah, but
So-
it's the future.
That's just me being, a child inside, I guess. So he saves her, and he basically is like, I need you to explain some stuff to me, because then like all the whatever, like the bells go off, and they go back to this building that was previously like abandoned when George showed up, but now it's just like full of food and drink, and they all just go and sit down and start eating. And he's like, well, where did all this food come from? And they're like, we're not supposed to talk about it. So he's like, oh, that's pretty weird. That's bizarre.
Yeah, he asks him a bunch of questions. The guy's like, "You ask a lot of questions."
Yeah,
Just
they're not
doesn't say anything else.
Yeah, they're not interested at all in like talking to him, even though he's dressed completely different than them. He looks different than them. They're just not interested in him.
Yeah, they're not interested in him at all.
And then he's like, well, do you guys have any books? And they're like, yeah, we have books. He's like, well, take me to see them. I can learn anything I need to learn from the books. So they take him to like this old library, which I thought was super well done, because he goes in there,
Yeah,
and the
it's
guy
kinda
hands
funny.
him a book, and he opens it, and the pages are kind of like coming out of it and falling apart. And then he like squeezes the book, and it like turns to dust.
Yeah,
Which I kind of mentioned this when we talked about the book, is that in the year 800,000, yeah, there would hardly be any physical things left from like
Yeah.
our time. So
Yeah.
they did a good job of kind of showing that even in this old version of the movie.
right. And so he like gets annoyed and he decides to leave, and he goes back and his time machine is gone. And it has like I this makes more sense to me. Like, why didn't they just say this in the book? There's like literal drag marks straight into the Sphinx.
Right. Yeah. Right into the doors, which, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense then how he knew right where it was.
Yeah, like why didn't the book do that?
I'm not sure.
It just made no sense to me.
So now he knows that, somebody took his time machine, and he's like, well, I have to get my time machine back. And he ends up wandering around, right? That's when he finds the holes in the ground.
Well, Weena shows him where they are. Like,
That's right. That's right.
and she says Morlocks, but she like won't explain it. And then she's like, "I'll take you to the talking rings,"
Yeah,
which I actually like that. I like
I
that.
did
That's
too.
cool.
I thought it was awesome. So they go to like a museum, basically, kind of like in the book, and she shows him these. It's kind of like a mirror on like a pedestal, and they grab like these rings that look like they're from Sonic the Hedgehog.
They do.
And when you spin them on this mirror, it activates like the audio, and the audio tells a story while the ring is spinning. I thought that
Right.
was really cool.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. And so like he like learns about like humanity, right? Like and the Myrlocks and the Eloy and the just their like how they moved underground. Which it's funny that you mentioned that before, because I didn't notice that in like the bomb scene.
Yeah, so that's what it explains, is that's why people moved underground, is because when they were warring with each other, some of the people went underground and some of them moved back to the surface to try and live on the surface, basically, is what happened. And it just so happened that after they basically decimated the Earth, it was easier essentially to live underground for quite a while.
Right.
And then they basically got to the point though where they couldn't come above ground. Is also
Right.
kind of what happened because they lived underground for so long. So then he's like, oh, well, obviously they are the ones who took my time machine. I have to go get it back. And he goes to these holes. There's like a bunch of holes in the ground. that
Well,
look kinda like
actually, the freaking alarm thing starts ringing.
right, which sounds like an air raid siren, which is
Yeah,
why
it does. It does. It's like when you said it, I was like, oh, like I guess I just am dumb and didn't really notice.
Well, he kind of says it because the air raid siren goes off, and all of a sudden, all of the Eloi start walking towards this door that's open now, and he can't like they basically start walking like zombies essentially towards this door, and he can't stop any of them, and he's looking for Weena because she's also walking towards it.
Right.
And she walks through the door. A bunch of them walk in the door, and then the sirens quit, and the door's shut right in George's face. And then the ones who are on the outside, they turn around, they walk away. And he's like, he keeps trying to tell them, he's like, you know, you don't have to do stuff like that anymore. The sirens no longer mean you need to go underground anymore. Because that's what he experienced in the whatever time he stopped and heard the sirens, and people were immediately running for underground shelters.
Right. Makes sense. It checks out.
It does. And I liked that connection that they made. I thought that was interesting.
Excuse me.
So then he has two missions. He's got to get his time machine back, and he wants to get Weena back now because he's like, there's a little bit more of like a love story kind of going on in the movie than there was in the book. Basically, they're trying to kind of.
I like the way that Weena's portrayed though. How she's like kind of like a simple. I know maybe that's messed up, but I just felt like I don't know. She does a good job of being like she's supposed to be like a child almost.
No, she does. She does a very good job actually, and they did a good job of giving her the character and how she portrays it. They did a very good job. And might I just add, for a 1960s movie, Weena is pretty hot. Like
They're all pretty. All the Eloi are pretty.
anyway, so then what's he do next?
Oh yeah, he goes down in the caverns and then he realizes that the Eloi they're the food for the Murlocs. The Murlocs. I always want to say Murloc, but it's not right. Morlock.
Yeah, this ain't World of Warcraft.
I know, but that's all I could think.
And we'll probably get sued if we say Murlocs.
Oh, bring it on. At least we'll get an email.
Yes, true.
So yeah, he finds out that they're food, and then so like he goes down there, and then he like starts fighting them off, and then they decide to help him. The Eloi finally like decide to defend themselves.
Yeah, because basically because he's like, wow, these people down here, which they did a good job, I thought, of portraying the Morlocks again for their 1960s technology.
Yeah, I mean they kind of look like garbage, but I feel like that's not fair.
Well, exactly. And I mean, to be fair, they did a pretty good job because I mean, how many of them did they have in costume at the same time? Like
A lot, dude. I think at one point I counted like 15.
that's what I'm saying. So that's quite a few to have in costume at one.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I thought they did pretty good. I mean,
And there's a nice little action scene that I kind of like.
at this part,
Yeah.
when he's fighting them off,
Yeah, with the torch.
yeah,
He's like actually kicking their ass.
yeah, because he was definitely not a freaking pussy at all. Like he was like, I'm gonna save all these people single-handedly.
This inventor guy though is just like kicking ass. Makes no
Mhm.
sense.
No, it made no sense. A guy who built a time machine, I highly doubt is gonna have any sort of fighting skills.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. I guess I can't say that because one might pop out of time and beat the shit out of me, but I just wouldn't think that.
And then they like set a bunch of fires, right? And so all the tunnels collapse.
Yeah, because he just so happens to know that the liquid pouring out of this one pipe is flammable,
Oh yeah, you're right.
and he sets it on fire, and it basically sets a ton of stuff on fire, and then he takes the Eloi are able to run to the surface, and they start throwing a bunch of wood down there to feed the fire, basically. and that causes the all the tunnels right there to collapse.
Yeah, and then so the next day, the door to the Sphinx is open, and he goes to
Which-
get his time machine.
Which made way more sense now the way they
Yeah.
showed. You know,
It does make way more fucking sense.
right? Because the Morlocks, damn it,
See?
the Morlocks, because of what he did to them now, are like, yeah, okay, we give, sorry, you know, and they're like, we'll give you your time machine back.
Kind of. They were like, psych, and they attack him, so he can't.
Yeah.
You can't have Weena come with him.
Right? Yeah, because he wants Weena to come back to his time with him.
Mm-hmm.
So then, yeah, he has to freaking hit his time machine real quick to get. Which I thought they did a pretty okay job at this. You know, he jumps out of, or he kicks that one off, and then he hits his time machine real quick, and it like super ages, like it falls apart. I thought that was kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
And then he ends up deciding to go back to his time,
Right.
and tell everybody what he did, basically.
Yeah.
Because he told those guys to meet him in like 5 days, and he would discuss. He would rediscuss the same thing with them, the guys that didn't believe that he had traveled through time.
Right. And he basically comes back and doesn't convince them.
Right. So he comes back, and this was pretty decent attention to detail. His time machine appears outside the house because the time machine doesn't move through the physical world. It doesn't move in the 3 dimensions. It only moves in the 4th dimension. So it appears outside his house. He tries to tell all those guys what he just did, which is now we're back to what happened in the beginning of the movie when he comes stumbling in. And yeah, they're like, whatever, that's the craziest story I ever heard. And he shows them the flower, and they're like, doesn't matter, doesn't mean anything. So he drags his time machine back into the laboratory where it was originally, and then he leaves again. He goes back to the future, essentially. No pun intended there.
Sure.
And then I kind of like the really quick little summary that Philby gives us right there at the end, because he explains, oh yeah, he drug his time machine over here so that it didn't reappear in the Sphinx. It'll reappear right outside, and he'll be able to reappear again right where he left Weena, essentially.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I guess I
Because-
didn't really think about that either.
Yeah, because she was at the door while they were while he was trying to freaking, go back in the time machine. And so he thought if he appeared outside the door, then she would be right there.
Right. So you want to talk about the 2002 one now?
Yeah, go ahead and start. I gotta give my
So,
kids
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't really like this movie. Like, I didn't really enjoy it all that much. I know you like it, but I don't know. Because this one takes quite a bit of a different approach to the time machine story, and I
You're right.
really didn't like it.
So I do like this movie. I still liked it again this time, and I hadn't watched it in years and years and years, and I was worried that maybe it had lost some of its luster, but I still really did like this one. So there are a lot of differences between this one and the
It's
book.
basically the only thing that's the same is like the time machine and like the names of stuff.
Very true. Yeah, so this one still is based on the book, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, but you're
I feel-
correct.
I feel like it's a whole different type of story though, because like the H.G. Wells book is about like an inventor who's just trying to explore because he wants to explore. This is a movie about a guy like trying to save a woman that he loved.
So I actually kind of liked that, though.
I don't. I think I don't know.
But
The main actor guy. I can't stand him.
Oh, really?
No, I think he's
Um,
awful.
Guy Pearce?
Is that who it is?
Yeah.
I
So
don't-
actually, and I don't know him from anything else, to be honest. I only know him from this movie. And I actually thought he's not bad. I thought he did pretty good.
I don't know.
And that's fine. I mean, that's good. We can have a discussion about that. I thought he did pretty good because I like the way that he changes characters, like from the beginning when he's kind of this aloof scientist type guy to then his fiance dies. So now he has like a serious reason to get serious about something in life. And he kind of like switches gears and becomes this very serious, very dedicated scientist.
I don't know. I mean, we'll get to it a little bit later, but I feel like a lot of the things he does don't make a lot of sense.
That's fine. What? So like what?
Like I don't know. Like he only tries to save his girlfriend one time, and he's like, "Why can't I change the past?" I feel like you could have tried multiple times.
No. So I was gonna bring that up. The one we watched on Amazon, if that's where you watched the same one as I did. Pretty sure it's cut down because I still remember from the one I watched on VHS that he did try multiple times and there were multiple things that happened to her.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
I specifically remember that because you're right. In this version, she dies twice.
Yeah, and he gives up almost immediately, and I was like, what?
Right. And I'm pretty sure in the movie that I remember from back when this came out, I'm sure it's still in Mom and Dad's freaking shop somewhere in a box of videos.
No, dude, I bet it's in that like wood paneled thing, that like opened up.
Yeah, and there's movies in the door.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're probably right. But I specifically remember that I'm pretty sure in that he tries 4 or 5 times.
Because that really bothered me that he was like, why can't I change the past?
No. So, and I did notice that, but I think that this was a little bit more of a cut down version because I specifically remember him also. So for anybody who wonders what we're talking about, while he proposes to his fiance, a guy comes out to mug them and steal their stuff. And his fiance tries to keep the ring that he just gave her away from him. The guy has a gun. He tries to fight the guy, and the guy ends up shooting his fiance and killing her. So now that's why he wants to invent his time machine. It takes him 4 years. He creates his time machine, which, in my opinion, though, that time machine looks gorgeous.
Really?
Seriously, you don't like it?
No, I think it looks stupid.
Really?
I like the one from the 60s a lot better.
Really?
I don't know.
I
feel like it's weird the way it spins. I don't know. I don't know if I'm just like being a cynical piece of shit, but I really did not enjoy this movie.
Well, that's fine. I mean, that's your opinion. I did like the design because I liked all the prismatic glass and stuff like that. Because to me, the prismatic glass type stuff I thought made sense as far as what you might need for a time machine to bend light or however you might travel through time. Anyway, so he builds his time machine because he thinks he's going to go back and he's going to save his fiance. So he goes back to the same point right before he basically had proposed to her. He took her like off the ice skating rink or away from that rink and he proposed to her. So he goes back to right before that moment and he's like, no, we got to go somewhere else. We can't go into the park. And he takes her and he's going to go buy her flowers from like a flower shop. And while he's in the flower shop, she ends up getting run over by a horse and carriage and killed again. And
brutally.
Yeah, it is pretty bad. But you're right. So that's the only 2 times it shows. And now he's all like a lost puppy. He's like, well, why can't I change the past? Why can't I change the past?
I was like, you tried once, dude.
You're right. You are correct. This doesn't make sense. You're right. He only tries 1 time in this movie. But I promise you there's a version somewhere out there that he tries at least 3 or 4 times. Okay. And she ends up just dying in different ways.
That makes more sense.
So after he keeps going back into the past to try and change it, he's like, well, now I need to go to the future and figure out why I can't change the past. Maybe someone in the future knows why I can't. So he ends up going to the year 2030. And in 2030, he goes to this library that has like this artificial intelligence type stuff, and he's questioning it about why he can't change the past. And the artificial intelligence type thing brings up the book to the time machine.
I did not like.
I didn't like that.
Oh,
too self-aware.
Ugh. Yeah, like I don't know. The older I get, the less I like fourth wall breaks like
Yeah,
that.
no, and I agree with you on that. I did not like that. I thought that was a very weak point in this movie.
And I don't the guy that got to play that freaking like assistant thing. I don't like him either.
I can't think of his name right off the top of my head.
Is it
That's fair
Orlando
too, though.
Jones?
Yes, Orlando Jones. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like him.
So he basically, though, I mean, they still can't answer his question in
What
2030.
what does he say? He's like time. He's like time travel, and the guy's like, here are the fiction options, and he's like
Yeah,
real
he's
world
like-
application.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's like science fiction, and he's like, no, real world application. And so they still can't answer his question, though. So while he's in 2030, though, if you kind of pay attention to kind of cues in the background, they are getting ready to colonize the moon. They're going to start colonizing the moon. Which, I mean, I thought that was really cool, and they might be right on track for us doing the same thing. So this might be a warning to all of us.
I thought we're going to Mars.
Oh yeah, who knows at this point? So he gets back in his time machine, and he's like, I'll go further into the future, and I'll find out why I can't change the past. So he starts going into the future, and after only 7 years, he all of a sudden gets like jostled around. So he stops because something's happening around his time machine, and the whole world is just like gone to shit. Like it's like exploding and going nuts, and
There's like troopers running around too, right?
yeah, there's like all these like military guys running around, and they pull up and they come get him, and they're like, hey, you have to get to your shelter, your designated shelter. And he's like, what is happening? And they're like, what, have you been living under a rock? He's like, yes, I've been living under a rock. Now just tell me what's happening.
Yeah. I did kind of like that.
So they're like, what were they doing? Like they set off bombs to terraform.
Yeah, no, they were like I thought they were like terraforming the moon, right?
Yeah. So they said that the terraforming that they did on the moon screwed up the moon's orbit. Well, he looks up, and the moon is like super close to the Earth, and it's broken into pieces.
Which does look cool.
Which looks awesome. I love that part. So basically, now they're screwed because they tried to terraform the moon and they screwed it up. They screwed the moon up. They broke it into pieces, and
and so it's like impossible to live on Earth.
Right. Yeah. So now Earth is just being destroyed because it's thrown off the Earth so bad.
And this is something I like. When he gets back in his time machine, it jostles him around. So he's knocked unconscious. So he's traveling forward for a really long time.
Yeah, because as he gets knocked out, he falls on the forward lever, and it just goes all the way forward. And so which, I mean, it's easy to say that it doesn't look great, but this was in 2002, and I kind of did like the fast forward time lapse of him traveling into the future.
I don't think that's bad.
And no, I like it, and it basically shows like all the water around where he was collects, and it cuts this huge deep river into right kind of close to where he was.
Right.
And then he finally kind of wakes up, and he goes through an ice age too.
Yeah, like freezes around him.
That's right. It freezes around him. Yeah. Because the way the time machine works in this is essentially the same, is that he can't be moved like physically anywhere, but he stays stationary moving through time, and it creates this cool kind of sphere around him, and the outside forces essentially cannot affect inside the sphere. So like you see the snow like pile up around it, and then it recedes, but it never like goes into the sphere.
No. Yeah, I mean he's like outside of time, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's how it makes sense.
So then he wakes up, and he slows himself down, and he stops in the same year that the book and the other movie had done. And it's like the year 802,701.
Yeah. Which is a random number, but all right.
It is pretty random, but you can blame H.G. Wells for that.
True.
It's random to us. Maybe it has some really, really deep meaning.
Yeah, maybe.
Somebody email us and let us know.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like you add them together and then you divide them by 8 and
Then you get 9/11.
yeah.
Anyways, um, so he gets out and he goes walking, and this is where so we already had quite a few differences in the fact that he's doing this because he's trying to change something. That's why he built his time machine. So whereas the other ones, they built a time machine, like you said, just to go check out time. Basically.
And I guess, which I don't even really like the book a lot, but like this, like that whole, that's like, I feel like there's a whole change of like the whole feeling of the book, or like even movie for me, is like that
Sure.
he has like entirely different motivations.
And you're not wrong. Yeah, you're right. Is this
It's not necessarily
definitely
bad.
It's definitely much more though, like it's centered around several love stories, basically, is what it's centered around. It's not centered around time travel aspect, basically.
No, time travel is like set dressing in this one.
Right. Because basically he walks off and he ends up finding the Eloi. And the Eloi in this are much more like kind of like Native American people, or natives, in the sense that their technology is very primitive. And I really like though that their houses are built into the sides of the cliffs where the river cut through. I thought that was kind of neat.
Kind of cool.
It's a very cool like scene that they paint right there. So he shows up and he's trying to talk to these people, and they are very interested in him, and they're very skeptical of him because he's dressed different, he looks different. So whereas in the old version, they're all, white, blonde hair, these people are much more like Native American looking almost. They look like they live outside, which you would think even the pale people in the other one would look like that. And they're very skeptical of him, and lo and behold, one of them can speak the Queen's English, so he can talk to her.
Is like, she learns it from signs, which makes no sense to me.
I wouldn't have a problem with this if it was in the year 4000.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but when you're talking 800,000, I don't know if anybody grasps just how big of a number that is.
It kind of bothers me, and the thing that happens later bothers me too with that.
And I agree with you. So she knows English because she's a teacher, and she teaches languages to all the people, but most of them forget it when they're young, which is that's fine. Yeah, so he now has one that he can communicate with, and her name is not Weena, it's Mara.
Yeah, which is better than Weena.
Correct. And it makes more sense the way these people live. They're much more like tribal people. It makes more sense, though. The name change, I think, was necessary.
Well, and the Eloi in this aren't necessarily like dumb, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
They're not like helpless.
No, these are it just looks, like I said, like a tribe of native people just living their life. That's basically what he thinks he's kind of stumbled across, is because they don't act like cattle, they don't act like any of that stuff.
No, they don't. They act like regular people, and they nurse him back to health, and they're really nice.
That's right, yeah, because he was very hurt. That's right. And they nurse him back to health. And so he's trying to learn stuff, though, from these people. He kind of asks them the same thing, why couldn't we change the past? And of course they're like, what are you talking about?
And then one night, right, doesn't he have just before I forget, like, doesn't he have a dream about like a face with like a bunch of teeth?
He has a dream of himself like walking, a first person view. So we get this quick first person view of him walking through the woods, and this huge like toothed face above him, and it tries to like bite him. Yeah, and it wakes him up, and he's freaking out. And one of the other Eloi in the tent with him, Mara's little brother, is also freaking out about the same dream. He keeps saying, he's saying it in the Eloi language, but he's saying like the Morlocks, they are going to get me, whatever. And I was just gonna say that I like how they ask where he's from, and he's like, "I'm actually from right here." Just
Which they actually do in the '60s movie too.
right, they do. um, so he thinks this is weird, obviously, that he had this dream, and he talks to Mara about it, and she's like, "We all have that dream."
Yeah, which to me is like, ugh.
Yeah, it was actually I kind of like that because I was like, "Oh, that's pretty creepy," like, because it is a creepy dream that he has. And then he basically spends some time like learning about these people's kind of culture and stuff, and he asks where her parents are, and she says they're all gone. And he's like, "What do you mean? There are no older people here?" And she said, "No, they're all gone."
Yeah, and
He's
we
like, "Well,
find
what-"
out why.
Right. Well, he's like, "What do you mean? They're all dead?" And she's like, "They're just gone." She said, "We don't think about the past. We just remember them with these." And they come up on this really crazy looking like windmill thing that they're building. And so while they're there at this like basically like graveyard remembrance shrine thing, a bunch of holes appear in the ground, and these freaking giant kind of pale looking ape looking dudes come up out of the ground. They like pop up out of the ground, and some of them are all skinny and they have like blowguns, and they freaking shoot these darts to hit some of the Eloi, because the Eloi are freaking out when this happens.
Right.
And they shoot these darts to hit the Eloi, and it leaves like all this black nasty ink on them. That's when the huge ones comes out, I guess, huh?
Yeah, because they're marking them.
Right. So the skinny ones, the skinny Morlocks, are shooting these deals. So we find out that these are the Morlocks in this one. Which,
spoilers.
to be honest, I love these ones though.
I know you do.
Really
I like them too. I like them too. I don't know.
just-
I just think this whole scene's a little silly, just the way it kind of happens.
It is it's good the way that it's like telling the story of what kind of the dichotomy is between the Eloi and the Morlocks, but I agree, because the only reason it happens in this at this time, because we just heard not very long ago that it only happens at night, and now it's happening like in the middle of the afternoon for story purposes. So when the skinny ones shoot them with the darts, the larger Morlocks go and
that's my bad.
retrieve the
You
ones.
started doing that.
You did too. Now it's just
I know.
stuck on my brain.
So,
So the larger Morlocks go and they grab the people who were marked, and they take them back to the holes, and they sink back through the sand with them back underground. And that's how they collect the Eloi. And I thought that was really well done though in this, and I like that that's kind of their collection system, instead of just like rounding up a bunch of them and taking them and killing them, that they're collected.
it makes more sense, but since this is a movie based on the H.G. Wells book, I feel like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a whole different thing. I feel like that's going on. Like the same basic concept is there, but just like the relationship between the Aloy and the Morlocks is not the same. They're like hunter and hunted instead of like cattle and farmer.
Correct, because in both book and 1960s film, the Morlocks are supplying the Eloi essentially like cattle. They're keeping them alive. They are keeping them docile. They're breeding them to remain as food, because they use the term cannibals kind of lightly, because I mean, if you're talking 800,000 years of evolution, these two species would be very far apart on the evolutionary scale, I feel like.
But I guess it would be like a dog eating another dog, right? Like a boxer eating a Shih Tzu.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't think it takes 800,000 years though to get from a boxer.
You're right. It might be a whole different thing. I don't know.
I don't
not a
know either.
scientist.
We don't even know if evolution is real, so I can't speculate.
Oh my God! Don't. What are you talking about?
I'm not gonna get off on a tangent.
You can't just say something like that.
I'll save it for a round table chat. How about that?
You don't believe in it? Okay.
No, I do. I'm mostly just using it as a joke, because there are
Okay.
people out there doing that shit
I
right now
know.
who don't believe anything is real. Which, anyways, we're talking about time travel, so let's get back to that.
Yeah, let's get back to real science.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah, and I agree with you though in this, where the Morlocks are not like taking care of the Eloi in order to sustain them to use them as food. They literally are just showing up. They capture them just so they can kill them, and it's basically two separate types of humans.
Right.
Some that live underground and some that live above ground.
And I do think this is a more interesting like relationship these two have than like in the book or the other movie, but it's just not very faithful.
True. Well, and I would say that this one especially, the similarities between the book and this movie is that there is a time machine. And that's
Right.
about it.
Right.
And like you said, some of the names, that's about it. He does end up going to the museum.
Which how? How is there
I-
still fucking electricity?
I'm assuming they're using that it's like some sort of like nuclear reaction. I'm assuming, but yeah, I agree. It's like I said, you can't use the year 800,000 as if it's like even 1,000 years from now.
Yeah,
You can't.
even 1,000 years from now, like shit's not gonna be the same.
Exactly, that's what I mean. There's hardly any way any of this stuff would exist 800,000 years later, especially after you said the movie stated that basically the world has gone through several cataclysms up to this point. Anyways, he goes to the museum and the artificial intelligence, the Orlando Jones guy, is still there and he can still talk.
And he remembers him.
And he remembers him from 800,000 years ago.
Which, do you know how much data that thing would have to be storing to remember somebody like that?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, anyways. So he finds out basically what happened. It was it's the same general story in this as to why the Eloi and the Morlocks, some went underground, some stayed above, because in this one it just happens to be because they fucked up the moon. Which he sees the moon again when he is in the future, and it looks even better when it's like way up in the sky and it's all like you could see all the cracked pieces like out in orbit. I thought that looks awesome.
Would that, if it were to like crack in half, would there be like pieces that just stayed?
I was just gonna say, I have no idea if that's physically what it would do. It just looks cool.
I feel like that's always what they do, like in any media when they like break a planet. There's always like chunks kind of floating there still.
Yeah, and see, I don't know. I mean, there's a theory that like that's why the Taurid meteors belt exists or whatever, is because they think there used to be a planet in between like us and
Or
like
Mars?
maybe something like that. They think that based on the spacing of the planets that there should technically be one more. Like, I don't know enough about it to speak on it, but so I don't know. They're saying that those pieces then fell into orbit also around the sun. So
Huh.
But I don't know. I have no idea. Like I said, I don't know the science behind it. So now Alexander is the time traveler's name in this. I don't know if we still mentioned that.
No, we didn't, but I don't think it matters.
I don't think so. Arbitrary.
Yeah.
I guess that's why H.G. Wells left all the names out in his book, because you don't need them to tell a story, apparently.
Yeah. Apparently you do to tell a good one.
Well, yeah, true. So now Alexander, so Mara gets captured by the Morlocks during this whole capture thing. And so Alexander, that's basically his whole reasoning in this one, is he needs to go and get her, right?
Which I have issues with this, but yeah.
Well, they steal his time machine in this too.
They do.
So that's right. They steal his time machine in this. So now he also has two reasons. He's two reasons to go underground in this one. So he goes underground. He basically infiltrates the Morlock's lair and it's basically like a tribe of people if they looked like gorillas and they lived underground.
Yeah.
So
Super explained.
and for some reason they have a whole bunch of like steampunk machinery down there.
Yeah, which doesn't make any sense in this one.
No, I think they were just trying to like wink towards the book, but it doesn't.
Yeah, because they're not making the clothes for the Eloy and stuff. So
Right. I'll throw it out on a limb here. Maybe they're pumping air down to themselves underground so they can breathe. No idea. I don't know. It looks like it looks like if you took steampunk and you took like Tolkien's dwarves and you smashed it together.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it.
That's the kind of technology they have like underground there.
Maybe they're making blow darts and blowguns.
Oh yeah, well they have to be because I mean they have those things. They're also making loincloths. And because that's all they wear. So, I mean, apparently you need a lot of machinery to make a loincloth. Who knew? In the future, I guess I should say that.
Yeah, I don't. Can you buy a loincloth? I guess that's.
I mean, I have no idea. You can buy anything nowadays, though, so maybe.
Okay, we're getting off track. I knew this was gonna happen.
Just a little bit. So Alexander goes down there. He's
captured.
He gets captured almost immediately, and he is not quite as badass as the 1960s film guy.
Which I do appreciate because he looked like a pussy before too. So
correct. So he just gets captured almost immediately. Although he gets captured after he falls into a pit of human remains, which is pretty nasty.
Oh yeah, it's gross.
Yeah. And this is where the turning point in this movie is that he finds out, oh, they are capturing them to eat them.
Right.
So, and then he gets captured, and he immediately, and by immediately I mean he gets taken out of the pit and doesn't get put in his own cage. He immediately gets taken to see the head Morlock himself.
The Uber Morlock.
The Uber Morlock, yeah, that's how they put it in everything.
So dumb.
It's so weird, yeah.
I can't handle it.
So he goes in like this fancy looking room. It's got like little water pools all over, and there's a cage in the middle of it, and Mara is in this cage, and then up on this throne is the Uber Morlock dude, and he basically is a Morlock, but he just like looks like a vampire.
Yeah, he looks like
an anime vampire.
He's also a telepath.
Correct. So he proceeds to explain to Alexander that when they were forced underground as people, they basically forced themselves to evolve as well. Like I would say super fast, but it's been like 800,000 years.
Yeah.
So true. They were forced to evolve. So that's why they have specific like tiers of them. That's why there's the skinny ones who shoot the darts, and that's why there's the beefy ones who collect the people, and then there's ones like him who he essentially is the hive mind leader. He controls all of them with his mind.
Yeah.
And I didn't like this at all.
I don't like this part at all. I don't like pretty much the rest of the movie, if I'm honest.
I don't like that. I really don't. I also don't like that he apparently also controls the Eloi, which is why they all have the dreams of going underground, because to an extent he can also control the Eloi's mind, because of how basically the whole story is because he evolved so much. That's why he can do that.
Right.
So he apparently can also manipulate physical things, because at one point he like force chokes Alexander.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was pretty lame too. I
don't understand why there's like a final boss in this movie.
And that's a very great way to put it. That's what this dude is the final boss. And now Alexander has to get past him. But
he does explain.
He gets the whole like he can read Alexander's mind. So he's like, I know exactly what you're seeking, you know. And he gets shown like what his future could have been if his fiance had not died.
Yeah. Well, but then doesn't he explain to him too that he can't save her because it would create a temporal paradox?
Correct. Yeah. He says, "How can you save someone who was already destined to die?" Basically,
Right.
you cannot change the past because
Yeah,
that's
now,
what he
now I'm
said.
thinking about time travel, and I'm like, wait a minute. But then
Right.
you can't really think about time travel because it doesn't
Yeah, I
make
was gonna
sense.
say we can't really get into it, but that I know exactly what you're saying. Basically, he's saying she already died, therefore you cannot go and bring her back
Right.
because she is, she is already dead when you went back to try to save her. Like basically, if what he's saying is like if you had known she was gonna die first and you went back before she had died, you could stop it. But once she's already dead, she's dead in every timeline. So, and yeah, you can't think about time travel too much because we
Doesn't
can't.
make any sense.
Exactly. There's a lot of it that doesn't make any sense. So now he has his final boss fight with this dude, and they literally just fight like fisticuffs, kind of fight each other, and they end up getting on the time machine and they fight a little bit, and then time machine, Alexander hits it to go forward in time more, and I do kind of like this part because he ends up knocking the dude out of the sphere of time.
Yeah, that is cool that he ages to death outside of it, but his arms are
Yeah.
still holding on to him.
Yeah, I did kind of like that. I thought that was pretty cool.
This movie's kind of brutal, actually.
It's
got
it
some
kind of
brutal
is
stuff.
Yeah. So then he ends up stopping himself in the year like 6 million. I'm pretty sure is what it says.
Yeah.
And I hate this part because we also found out from the Uber Morlock that there are more tribes, and that's why he captured Mara, is because he's basically going to breed with her to continue making more Morlocks, and there's more tribes with more kind of head honcho dudes who can mind
Uber.
control Ubers, yes.
More Ubers.
Well, now he goes to the year 6 million, and instead of there only being like one freaking giant entrance head thing, now they're just everywhere. Because apparently the Morlocks they came above ground, and like the whole world is like fire and brimstone. Like it's literal just like hell on Earth.
Isn't the sun gonna explode before that?
I have no idea, man. I mean,
Pretty sure.
and you're probably right. So Alexander decides, well, if he can't change the past, he's going to change the future. So he goes back to where he was with Mara, and he forces his time machine to explode underground, basically.
And this kind of bothers me.
It bothers me too.
Because it makes no sense why he would throw his life away for this girl that he's been with for like 4 days.
Bingo. Which is what I said. This whole thing is kind of wrapped in multiple love stories. Is basically what they use to drive the plot.
Like one of my big issues with this movie is like there's not even really chemistry between them. It's just like she like is helping him like understand the world. That's
Right.
it. There's not even really like a connection there.
Right, and like you said, like within like 4 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, and this dude's heartbroken about his girlfriend, and he like gives up that easily for this girl who probably smells bad.
So the 1960s one did a much better job of wrapping the little love story up because, like you said, Weena is more of just like a child clinging to this adult. Basically, she has like a childlike interest in him that just happens to be a love interest. Whereas in this, yeah, this Mara girl has no reason to trust this guy.
No.
I guess because he comes to save her is why she trusts him. So
yeah, but like, how big of a simp do you have to be?
I forgot we were going to talk about that on one of our
yeah,
we never have. So write that down for next time.
Somebody email us and remind us to talk about simps.
Yeah, no kidding. So yeah, he blows up his time machine, and apparently that kills all the Morlocks, even though he was
I didn't understand that at all.
Me neither, because so apparently when his time machine blows up, it like rapidly ages everything around it, except
like
the
a
ground.
time bomb?
Yeah, but it's not a sphere; it just follows the contour of the ground.
yeah, what?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I didn't like that either.
Okay.
Which apparently, I guess he thinks he killed all the Morlocks because he basically says he changed the future now. And so now he can't go back to his time, obviously, because he destroyed his time machine. And he's just going to stay in the future with these people. And then we get this really quick clip back to his laboratory with his slave and his and Philby.
Slave?
Isn't that what she is?
No, I don't think so. I think she's just like his maid, like not his
Oh.
actual slave.
She calls him master, so I just assumed.
Yeah, but that's just like rich aristocracy stuff.
I think you're right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. His maid lady
His
and
slave.
and Philby. Sorry, is the first word that came.
I
to
know.
mind.
I think you're painting the wrong picture here.
You're right. It is like 1800s freaking New York.
No, it's turn of the century,
1900s.
dude. It's 1899.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, 1899.
So yeah, and then that little scene at the end where Philby's like, "Ooh, you could come work for me," and she's like, "Only till Master returns." And that's
Yeah.
pretty much the time machine.
Yeah, the ending was very pointless. Yeah.
See,
So
like,
I mean,
if to me, if you had to pick one, watch the one from the 60s. It is actually a joy and kind of a delight. And I think if you have any like interest in filmmaking, I think like checking out the practical effects in that movie are pretty legit.
that's true. I also agree that I think the 60s one is well worth watching. So I couldn't find anywhere you could watch it for free. I'm sure most people can do that. I went ahead and paid for it. I rented it. I mean, so
I thought I rented it, but I didn't realize that my friend was signed into my PlayStation, so he rented it for me. Thanks, Joe.
perfect. Nice.
It was an accident.
But no, the 60s one though, I mean, you could pretty much skip the book and just watch the 60s movie and you'll get more story than you would if you would listen to the book.
Yeah,
So
you would.
and I still like the 2002 one, but I agree with you. It's got a lot of just because it doesn't follow the already established story and it kind of is trying to do its own thing. I mean, it's very, very, very based, loosely based, obviously, on the book. So
Yeah. I mean, do you still enjoy it though, right?
I do. I still like the Time Machine, and you can get the Time Machine. The 2002 one is available if you have Amazon Prime on Prime Movies. So
Yeah. So what are we gonna do next time, Ryan?
it's a great question. I was going to ask you the same thing. I was leaning
Audibles?
towards. Yes, actually, yeah. We're going to need to take a look at the June Audible Originals soon. So let's plan on doing that next. We will take a look at June Audible Originals probably within about a week since they come out on Friday. And then I was thinking maybe.
That's the next episode will be the 11th. Because I'm sorry everybody it took so long for this episode to come out, but my house was so hot that my computer was overheating, so I couldn't even use it.
Which is just insane. That sucks.
Yeah, dude, it was so hot. Don't worry, new
Ugh.
place, AC. I'm great.
Oh,
Nobody worry
gosh.
about me.
Yeah, I bet. And then I kind of thought maybe after that we could do the Fellowship of the Ring,
Okay.
and
We
that
need to-
was kind of my thought.
I feel like we gotta squeeze a round table in there somewhere.
Yeah, because we're gonna need some time for sure. So plan on like the 11th doing the originals, hopefully. Maybe like
Okay.
the 18th we could do a round table, and then somewhere towards the end of the month we'll try to do the Fellowship of the Ring.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Well, with that, since we haven't dropped any plugs yet, feel free, anybody, to email us about anything at kotpl.pod@gmail.com. That'd be the easiest way to get a hold of us right now. And we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much. I feel like honestly at this point I'm tired of asking.
But to anybody who's still listening, this is a long episode, and I'm sorry, but we had a lot to say, and we talked about 2 movies in one episode, so gotta cut us a little slack.
Yeah.
But anybody who's still listening at this point, thank you very much for listening. We also really appreciate that.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate you guys. I mean, I'm actually a little disappointed because last month we had 1 less listen than in April, but oof, it is what it is.
That's all right. We got like 3 new subscribers on the YouTube channel.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, and I actually had like 2 or 3 new comments on several different videos.
Oh,
So.
dude, I would like to. Do we have enough to like do an episode where we just read them?
I would say no. Although the one you should go look at in the email or go over to YouTube and look at it. It was on Solaris, and holy cow, it's like a novel.
Really?
It's super long. Yeah, and the guy timestamps our video to the points that he's
What?
addressing. It's super well organized.
Is he telling us that we suck?
Actually, I'm pretty sure he's explaining things that we clearly didn't understand.
What? Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you should you should check that out because it's the most well written and well structured comment I've ever seen in my life. So I appreciate that.
What's this guy's name?
It is. Oh, you're gonna embarrass me. I don't have it pulled up yet. Hang on.
Oh no, but I want to shout this guy out if he's smart, because I'm not a smart.
His name on YouTube is Vestin.
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 Okay, well, I want to read this comment. See what this guy had to say. Okay, let's wrap this episode up.
Yes, let's. So again, everybody, thank you guys for listening, and we hope to catch you in the next one.
All right.